Hello and welcome back to Can James mend Mike's model train that his dad gave him in 1970?
Well, it's been in the attic since the 60s.
Since the 60s. We took quite a long time to make it all the way from the pub to the bunker, about 3 weeks to be honest. Mike's had a haircut and bought a new coat.
Yep.
I've grown a small beard and bought a new watch. But we're ready to go, and we had got to a point where we had the motor running, but not that convincingly because we hadn't cleaned it that thoroughly, because we didn't have the two essential cleaners, which are brake pad cleaner, aggressive but actually seems to work very well on model trains, doesn't attack plastic or anything, and isopropyl alcohol, which is a bit more gentle and good for cleaning things like the brushes and the commutator. So what I think we will do, Mike Fernie, if it's okay by you, is go back a few stages and take the rotor out of the motor again.
So last time we did get it moving, but it kind of ground to a halt and obviously it wasn't clean enough inside.
Yes, and we identified that the problem, well, there are two problems. One is that the motor is still a little bit grubby, and the other, I've already taken the screw out of the motor, the other problem is that the chassis is also a bit tight. So if you could look after those for a moment.
Yeah, how's our geography of parts doing?
The geography of parts is not very good, but sort of that's the front. Okay. So there's the retaining screw, the pony truck. If you dunk the two brushes in the ISO, actually we'll put them in the brake cleaner. What the hell, let's go hardcore. So just drop them in, swirl them around a bit, and then ignore them for a moment.
Why would you pick brake cleaner over the other alcohol there? What's the difference?
It's much stronger and it's a better degreaser. But I discovered its use by accident once in desperation, because I just assumed it would be too aggressive for something like a model train and that it would attack everything in sight, but it turns out it doesn't. It just removes filth. It's fantastic stuff. So I'm going to take the end of the motor assembly off again.
So I guess the one danger with this is that our cleaning fluid can't penetrate down into the axles there. That could be the one thing that scuppers us. Exactly,
and if this were we need a bit of a geography of parts thing going on here. If this were a Triang or Triang Hornby or Hornby locomotive, as in Margate Hornby, not Hornby Doublo, then we can take the connecting rods on the wheels off because they're retained with screws. On these Hornby Doublos, they're pressed in, and it's a rather trickier job. And to be honest, if you can possibly avoid it, you want to avoid taking the wheels off the axles, because then you have to re-quarter them, which is a very, very tricky job, and if you get it wrong, everything is ruined.
Define re-quartering.
Okay, it isn't actually relevant to a toy train, but it is to a real steam locomotive. The crank pins on the wheels are offset by usually 90 degrees.
Okay.
So that wherever the engine comes to a halt, one of the pistons can exert a force on the crank. If they were both in a line and the engine came to a stop, it wouldn't be able to start again. This is replicated on the model for authenticity, even though you can't see both sides at the same time, but it does make it run more smoothly. But if you don't get them accurately quartered by 90 degrees, or any angle, as long as they're all the same, you will get a tight spot as it moves and it won't run smoothly. It's a very, very tricky job, and it is best avoided. So, already having run it for a few minutes, we've got filth on the commutator again because it's just not clean enough.
So do you think running it has kind of coughed up more crap?
Exactly, and probably there is crap in the brushes.
Okay.
Look, there's some come off on my finger already. And whilst we're here, there is the commutator that we had nice and shiny, and it's now covered in filth again. Rubbish.
Yeah, did we sandpaper that last time? How did we clean that up?
Sandpaper? No, we used the little fibre scratch brush.
That's the right. Yeah.
And the thing we can do now that we have the brake cleaner, which is another useful thing to do, is clean the end of the brush, because the brush itself becomes dirty and then it's good for knout. So we're going to clean that. We're going to let those two springs fall off, because otherwise they fall off when you're not looking and escape.
Shall I put those springs over here?
Yes, put the springs in the geography of parts somewhere. One each side. And I think we can also, now we've got it apart, we can do a slightly more thorough job on cleaning out that, which you can do if you like, with this paintbrush dipped in the brake cleaner, and we've already cleaned out the brush holders, but we'll do it again. with a pipe cleaner.
What amount of brake cleaner should be on the brush? Am I okay to get it properly in there, or should it just be a dab?
Not too much, but it does evaporate, and you can mop it out with the tissue paper.
Okay.
Be careful you don't knock any wires off. In the yellow box of things, you should find a pipe cleaner somewhere. You can have a look, it's okay, it's not sacred. In that top long compartment.
Oh yeah.
You see my brush is filthy. Yes, so take the clean end of that, dip it in a little dot of brake cleaner and pass it through the brush holders, making sure you don't leave any bits of furry pipe cleaner behind. The brush is absolutely filthy.
So where about exactly? Through the centre here?
Yeah,
Right.
just push it through and wiggle it around a couple of times. Much better. Right, I'm going to use isopropyl alcohol. Always put the top back on this stuff. It's very effective, but it evaporates like a bugger, and if you leave it for a day, it'll be gone.
Have you got a thinner pipe cleaner?
No, they're British standard, I believe.
I don't think that's going to go.
You could try a screwed up bit of paper towel. Hang on.
Yep.
Paper towel. Are you sure that won't go through?
It just starts fraying and gets jammed a bit.
Okay. Don't force anything.
Okay, that's better.
This scratch brush, by the way, if you're thinking of trying this at home, is a very, very, very gentle one. What you mustn't do is scratch the commutator, and what you mustn't do also when you clean them out, I said this last time, but you mustn't burr the edges of the slots that separate the three segments, because if you do, you're effectively making a small file or a small woodworking plane, which will simply shave the brushes to nothing in a matter of minutes when you run the motor. So be very, very careful with this. Let's do a quick test if I do that.
Okay, I think those holes are fairly clean now. So you're saying, you're saying brush into.
Yeah, you
all of that.
can be quite vigorous in there. You won't damage anything. Right, that commutator is now much cleaner. Put that to one side, and let's have a go at. Can I reach over and get the yellow box of treasures? My tweezers aren't long enough. Or my jam jar's too big. How am I going to do that?
Just pour it out and get a new.
I haven't got another jam jar.
Have you got a sieve?
I'd still need another jam jar. What happened to my long tweezers? I know. Let's see. See, there's definitely dirt coming off because it's going into the jar.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, would you say that's sufficiently clean?
I would say that was beautifully clean, man.
So what's really cool is that we filmed at the Scale Electric HQ. Depending on when this video goes out, you may have seen that video describing how Scale Electric cars work. And while we were there, we told them about this video, and they said that the Cardiff Castle train has been retooled, so they will have brand new versions of this train coming out very soon. So hopefully, if we get this running, we can compare old versus new and do drag races and stuff like that.
Drag races, yes. Spoken like a true car journalist. Right, how is your...
So yeah, cleaned that, and the brush inserts should also be much cleaner.
Okay. So let's put a little dot of locomotive grease in there.
So is this specific for trains, or is this from somewhere else?
No, this is actually toy train grease, plastic compatible lubricating grease with PTFE. It's marvellous stuff. I've had this tube for, yeah, as usual, 100 years. So all I need, you don't want to overdo this, otherwise it will spread onto the commutator and we'll be back where we started. So it's like a pinhead's worth of grease. I'll put a new blob on that end since I've taken it apart. And a smear on the worm.
It's crazy how tiny those little wires are. You would not want to snap one of them.
If you snap one of those, you're in deep doodah because they're extremely difficult to repair. You need the world's most minute soldering iron. Okay, you'll accept that's in position in the motor, in the magnet. We know the magnet's quite good.
Is that central on that? Looks a bit skewy.
It does look a bit. It's because the magnet is pulling. I'm trying to avoid touching things with my fingers. There, that's in.
That's the one.
Just get a little final brush, and then take, where's Diddy brush? Diddy brush is there. A last little clean. Right, that is together. It spins. So, little screws, silver ones at the top.
Silver at the top. These springs were a bit of a bugger last time, weren't they?
Yeah, those springs are escape artists. You have to be very careful. I also don't have any spare ones.
Do they conduct anything? Do they need to be clean, or are they just placeholders?
Those ones are placeholders.
I was going to say, because they're a wee bit scummy.
Sorry, no, the ends of them do need to be clean, yes,
right,
where they go into the brush, so they're worth a little rub with wire wool, if we've got some. Or you can scratch them clean with the...
I can use the brake cleaner on those.
Yeah.
You can, right?
It's cold in here. Okay, that is together. I'm ready for brush insertion. So line the slot in the brush up with the slot in the brush holder. Then I need the spring for the left-hand side, which is, hang on, is that one. No, that's correct. So it goes on there, round once, in the slot. That's not quite lined up, is it? That is. Is that?
Sorry. Yeah, that's it.
Bloody marvellous. I touch that with my terrible greasy finger. That look aligned. Slot in brush with slot in.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the wraparound that's tricky.
Yeah, also you mustn't trap the wire with the spring, which I haven't done. Right, round once, and yeah. Round once, and into the slot. That made a satisfying little click as it lined up with the...
That was slick.
That was quite slick. So the spring, the retaining spring for the brush, sits in a slot in the brush holder, but there is also a slot like the slot in a screw. There's also a slot like a slot in a screw in the end of the brush, so that the spring sits in that as well. So you have to have them lined up, which we've done successfully. The springs are not trapping the wires. That's all looking quite messed up. How? Oh, there we go.
So should we do a retest now?
I think we should now do a retest on the motor.
So yeah, last time it span up nice and quick and then slowly started to die.
Started to die as
It's consistent.
dirt got back into it. Hold it free of the chassis, and that's better.
Keep going, keep going. Definitely better than last time.
Right, you join us at a very exciting moment in Can James mend Mike's train that his dad gave him in 1970. Well, it's been in the attic since the 1960s.
Yep.
We've rebuilt the motor, cleaned the commutator, cleaned the ends of the brushes, cleaned out all the motor housing, checked the magnet, wired it up. Here we go. That is a result. Are we agreed?
Sounds nice and consistent.
So the motor works. That is good. The problem we now have is that the chassis is a little bit stiff.
Yeah, it was
Very stiff.
The rearmost one was the stiffest
but
one.
this is, yes, you're absolutely right, because there's a little bit of play between the coupling rods, so I can move that front axle independently by a few degrees, and I can feel that that's pretty free. The middle driven one is a little bit sticky. That one is very sticky. So, trying to do this without dismantling it any further, we shall...
Is it a case of just getting some fluid
Yes.
right in down there?
Exactly that. A bit of brake cleaner, hopefully.
And there's nothing electrical down here, this is all mechanical, so we can...
The only thing electrical down here is the contact between the pickups here,
Right.
the two tiny little wire pickups, and the wheels. But if they get cleaned off, that's no bad thing, because they often have a build-up of cack on them as well. The question really is it the axle that's stiff or the pin? I would suspect the axle.
Is it worth just kind of dousing the whole thing in
Absolutely.
brake fluid?
I can see down there. Can you see in that there's cack down there?
Yes, yeah.
But if we get the
Flakes of...
probably a bit of fluff as well, if we get the little magnifier out. Good God.
It's bad, is it?
It's not brilliant.
So how do we attack that? Do we go from the outside and just kind of poke in, or do you go down between the chassis and the wheels there?
Well, I think on this rear axle, where you can see quite a bit of fluffy crap in there, in fact, it might even just clean tweezers on trousers.
So to do this 100% thoroughly, we could dismantle all this, but that would take days.
It would take days. We'd have to devise some sort of puller to get those pins out.
Right.
And then you have the problem of getting it back together, which is, I mean, I've taken more complicated ones than this apart, like a 210 Decapod Evening Star locomotives. But it took me several days. So even you lot don't want to watch that, he says, actually speaking to the correct camera for once. So, do you want to do this? This be your special treat. I know you've been looking forward to it. So
is this with tweezers or brush?
This is with the brush and the brake cleaner.
Does it matter if the brake cleaner's that dirty, or should we get some fresh?
I would say it doesn't matter that much because it's settled to the bottom. So I think to start with, if you douse, not too much, but yeah, there and there, so where the axle goes through the chassis.
Just down in between the wheel and the...
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Just, you can, plenty of it. Oh, that's the wrong tribe.
Don't bring that Battle of Britain bullshit here.
Oh.
Okay, how's that?
No, I think you might have been a bit scared of it there. And it's still a bit sticky.
What about
It's
down
slightly
in
better,
here?
I think.
Down in there's like on the actual axle itself, in that gap.
Yeah, I mean, you can. It does evaporate, so
Okay, just go for it
don't
now.
worry too much. I'm inclined to believe I think the offset on that central pinion is not good either. It's too close to the chassis by 0.5 millimeter. So free. That's better than it was. This one is still sticky. But I'm going to try because I can't see this. It's
Oh, that tiny little screw in there.
yeah.
So what are you doing here exactly?
I'm just trying to move the pinion along the shaft by a tiny fraction of a millimeter, so it's closer to the center of the worm,
So giving it
but also
clearance.
yeah, giving it a little bit of clearance there. But it's been on there a very long time. If I put something very thin behind it, like the little knife blade.
How precise does that placing need to be? Can that move along horizontally, or?
It can a bit, but not too far, otherwise it will, if it's too far one way or the other, it will either completely miss the, yeah, that just moved a fraction then. It will either miss the worm and it will jump, or it will bind with it, so. Bugger.
To hold it.
That's a good, yes please. That's a good sign though, that it moved a bit more easily. Okay, that's good. So that tiny little grub screw that you might be able to see secures the pinion to the central axle. That pinion is driven by the worm on the motor, but that was slightly too close, I thought, to the edge of the chassis. It wasn't quite binding, but there was a fraction of a millimetre between it, so if a little bit of cat gets in there, that will make it sticky. So all I've done is slacken the grub screw, and I've moved it that way by not even half a millimetre, I'd say. A very, very tiny movement, but it could make a difference. In fact, it's already a little bit freer, so we have a bit of
I find it odd, the red wire that comes down right into the wheels. The placement of that seems very odd.
well, it's that way.
As if it, yeah. I would be scared of it sort of catching.
Yes, agreed. See, that's already a bit better.
Good.
Now we need to try and get some down in there.
Just hoping this thing is smooth as silk when we get it going.
Oh, you see, look at that.
Yeah,
That's already miles better.
That's nice.
So we'll just let that dry off for a bit, and then we'll put a tiny dot of lubrication in there. And I think we might be onto something. Yeah, that's miles better.
This thing's gonna fly.
I don't know about that, but it will go along. I'm going to, where's Diddy Brush? May as well clean off the pins on the connecting rods, the crank pins, just in case there's cack down in there. There almost certainly is cack down in there, because there is everywhere else. In the future, could you try and get your toy trains out of the loft more than once every 50 years?
Surely you must have had some sitting around for a while that you just haven't used.
Well, I get given them to mend that have been, yeah, similar sort of time period, 50s, 60s, 70s, not doing anything. And people are amazed that they don't work after all that time. But as long as they weren't put away because somebody crashed them and broke them, the problem is usually dirt. Occasionally these are bent because people have picked them up and squeezed them too hard, but you know, you can take them apart and straighten those out very carefully with the tiny little hammer like that.
It sounds like that BMW 65 is fired up outside. Do you know who owns that? It's a very nice car.
No, I don't know who owns that. It's been there for a long time though. Is it silver? Or
Yeah,
grey?
silver
One,
65
yeah.
CSI. It's lovely. That is nice.
That is nice. Let's cut cameras for 10 minutes whilst we make sure that dries out properly, and then we will do a very thorough light oil lubrication. What happened to that little pot of light oil that I've had since I was a mere boy? Well, viewers, you join us at another very exciting moment in Can James May Repair Mike's train that has been in the loft since the 1960s and which it turns out he has never seen running. He's only ever handled it. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, can't
Picked
wait.
Picked it up and marvelled at its weightiness and its apparent value. But before we put it back together, having cleaned out the chassis and allowed the cleaner to evaporate off and dry out, we're going to lube it using the pin I've been using since I was a small boy. And similarly, this small pot of Yamaha musical instrument key oil.
How has this lasted that long, or do you refill it?
No, I've never refilled it, but you only use a tiny amount. It's not the only oil I use. I've also got the PTFE grease. I've got some other, all sorts of old cack. It is getting low though, because you now have to tip the bottle.
It's a bit furry in there as well.
What? Yes. There's a little bit of cack sunk to the bottom, but I don't think we need to worry about that. So if you put the pin in, that's too much actually. If you get a little, I don't even know if you can see that, you can see a tiny drop is hanging on the end of the pin. That is enough for two ends of an axle. The rule with lubrication, as the army will tell you, people who maintain guns, is it should be felt but not seen. Okay, keep it as long as you can for as long as you can and let this all do the work. You can come with me and do a good job, or you can go off on your own and make scrap, as my metalwork teacher used to say. So that's the rear axle done. That again is a bit too much oil, just a You don't want to put too much on here because on one side of the chassis is the return path of the current going through the motor. So if you put too much oil on, it will not conduct.
And how often do you need to re-lubricate a train like this if you were using it regularly?
More than once every 60 years, to be honest, Mike.
Don't have to go with me for it. I wasn't even alive. That's one thing. People cannot believe in the Lego video that I'm 25. They're like, no, you're lying. You must be 39.
Well, I don't know what to say about that. Maybe you've just got an old head on you, Mike.
I see that as a compliment.
Okay, so that's a bit on each. We've already lubricated the motor. What we will do is also put a tiny dot on each crank pin, like so. Oh, I missed. You can see now why this little pot of oil has lasted so long, because the amount that you use each time is a smear. Oh, I put a bit too much on that one. Amateur. Okay, return the special pin to its special place.
Is it time to rebuild?
It's almost time to rebuild. I just thought of something else we should do. Oh yes. On this side of the chassis, which we can call the live side, the wheels make contact with those tiny little spring wipers,
Yep.
which is how the current goes to the motor, and those can get a bit dirty, but I find that the best way to deal with them is, this is a piece of wet and dry paper which is almost completely worn out, so it can't do any damage. But if you just slide that between the wheel and the wiper and give it a little scrape like that, they're still touching the wheel. And then finally, just to keep the suspense up, because I know millions of people are watching by now, we'll just check that the back of those wheels are clean there, because if they're not, then everything we've done so far will be a waste of time, as if it wasn't a waste of time already.
How's it looking?
Pretty good, actually. This is the one part of your toy train that doesn't seem to be covered in absolute shite.
Because it's not being used.
But to be on the safe side, we will use my brush clean. I'll just, oh, those wheels are turning really nicely now. Okay, right, reassembly. I've already put a dot of grease on the worm gear, so we don't need to worry about that. That goes across the top, that goes there. There's a little locating pin. There it is.
So I've got one bolt here and then two others over there.
Screw, sir. Screw.
Sorry, screws.
We'll use the screw holding screwdriver on that because we can. No, that's the wrong screw.
Okay, you've got two over there on your...
Yeah, sorry, it's the... that's the big one for the front. Is it? Yes. That's the motor screw. Geography of parts was wrong there. If you could do the honours again.
Yep.
Okay. Strictly speaking, this is a screw placing device, not a screw driving device. You shouldn't drive things home with this. It's simply for getting it in. A lot of people commented on that in the reassembler because I was using the screw holding screwdriver to send the screws all the way home. And a lot of ancient telecoms engineers said to me, "Don't do that, May." So I don't do that. Right, Let's be bold, rather than test this as it is, let's assemble the whole thing and see if it goes, because if it does, that will be a wonderful moment. So I'm just reattaching the motor assembly to the chassis. I'm so confident that this is going to work, Mike, even though it's been in your attic or someone's attic since the 1960s.
Putting on the bodywork.
I'm going to put it together. You could just run the chassis on the track, obviously it doesn't need the bodywork to go. But let's put it together, and then we can have a glorious moment when it runs for the first time since before even I was born, possibly.
Yeah, this is actually a big moment because this thing hasn't ran for essentially half a century, which is pretty incredible.
You've never actually seen it go, have you? You've
No,
only ever looked at it.
No, yeah, I used to look at it in the box. I had my own little Hornby train that was just, you know, round in a circle, pretty simple stuff, but this was definitely next level. It was always something to sort of aspire to, I guess.
And how many times did you take it out and simply look at it wistfully, thinking, if only I knew an old grey-haired bloke who could mend this?
A lot of times, because I just liked how heavy it was. It was such a nice piece of kit compared to the train I had, so it's going to be very cool to see this thing moving.
If.
You said you were confident.
I am confident, but,
Good.
you know, TV loves disappointment, doesn't it? It loves failure. In the meantime, I'd like to say I hope you've enjoyed watching this short video. I would recommend finding something more constructive to do with your life. Okay, drop the... Bugger. Actually, we're going to... Sorry for that. I know the excitement is almost overwhelming, but we're going to have to get the screw-holding screwdriver back out.
One last time.
Yep.
Would you say this is your favourite tool? Oh, wait, sorry, I've not got it lined. That's it.
Beautiful. Is that my favourite tool? It's one of them, certainly. It's a very special thing. It's absolutely freezing in the bug-out bunker.
Where do you normally do your train repairs? Have you got a room in your house?
Well, no, I don't have a house, Mike, because it's been demolished. But before it was demolished, I had a little corner of the loft. But I haven't done any of this for a very long time, I have to be honest, because, sorry, that was my guts again. I haven't done any of this for a very long time because I've been sort of a bit tied up with things like the Grand Tour plug and our Man in Japan plug and Food Tribe plug.
Well, you're going for the full whack.
Yeah, let's do it properly. Oh God.
Good.
Yes. Oh, hang on.
So that goes... We're back out with that kit.
It's so exciting though.
They're normally just hooked on, aren't they? They don't normally have a proper screw.
No, well, this is another example of Hornby 00 being a bit too clever. Mike Fernie, your father's Hornby 00 Cardiff Castle locomotive that was in the loft since the 1960s and which has never run in your lifetime.
By quite some amount.
Yes, actually, because you are only 27?
25.
25, sorry. And this has not run in my lifetime, actually, and I'm approaching 57. So, here we go.
This is massive. Shall I provide a hand barrier just in case this thing pings off?
I don't think it's going to set off like a scale extra. Do you want to turn the knob or shall I turn the knob?
You turn the knob. I feel like we should smash a champagne bottle or something.
What if it doesn't go?
Then it's your fault.
Okay.
I will turn the knob.
You sure?
Okay. It's a huge moment. over half a
Don't
centimetre.
don't let it fall off the end of the table, because give it a good crank and off it goes. Man in heaven.
Amazing. Look reverse. Oh yes. What a relief. There goes an iPhone.
Yeah. Well, as they say on Cash in the Attic, Mike, how do you feel?
Feels really cool. Seeing that thing moving and knowing that it's been sitting in a box for over 50 years has been really, really cool. But now I want to take it to the next stage and build a layout and get it properly going round. This is one stage, and thank you very much for essentially restoring it.
That's quite okay, but you're on your own building a layout.
Why not?
I'm not really interested
You've
in
got
layouts.
plenty of room in that new house.
I know, but I just like mending them. Once they go, that's it. Anyway, I hope that was useful, viewers. I bet it wasn't.
And actually, guys, we have more hobby content hopefully coming. We've had Scale Electric, we've had Lego, now we've had model trains, but we want to know from you guys if you'd like to see more of this type of content. We're obviously a car channel, but if you guys have enjoyed this hobby style content and would like to see more, there's a link in the description below to Drive Tribe, and there's a poll, and you guys need to vote for what content you'd like to see. Would you like to see more model trains, more Lego, more Scale Electric? Cast your vote in the link below.
Airfix.
Airfix.
Airfix do cars. Like, subscribe, comment, get the app.